Well, it's time for a video before the Thanksgiving holiday. Hopefully, I've got some time off coming up, so hopefully I'll have some time to record some more videos, put some more content up. Really appreciate the new subscribers and members to the channel. Lots of stuff to put up here. Obviously, I'll probably have the rest of my life to get caught up on reviewing all of the books that I have. So anyway, though, as I was cleaning up this area, which is normally kind of a quasi dining room, I was moving some books around and thought, hey, there's some books that I needed to talk about. And it dovetails nicely with some of the things happening in the international world. Many of you probably heard about the little international or foreign relations kerfuffle there of Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, meeting with convicted spy Jonathan Pollard without going through official channels. And for those of you who don't know who Jonathan Pollard is, Jonathan Pollard was arrested and I think convicted in 85, I think convicted in 86 or 87 or so, but served 30 years for espionage against the United States and is still considered one of the most damaging spies or one of the most damaging espionage cases ever. And he, of course, was passing secrets to Israel and stole massive amounts. I forget how many, like 10,000s upward. It was thousands upon thousands of documents of secret nuclear material that then Israel took a lot of that and then passed it on to the Soviet Union, then Soviet Union, now Russia. So lots of baggage there. But Mike Huckabee met with Jonathan Pollard, I think either last week or the week before, without alerting the proper channels. And that was a very big deal because this guy is a legit convicted spy. And in Israel, he is considered a national hero because he spied on behalf of the Jewish state and firmly believes that he was doing awesome things while also making a pretty good chunk of change doing said spying. And even when he was released from jail, he still wasn't allowed to leave the country. And it was only, I think it was Donald Trump that approved his finally being released to travel and released to, then of course he moved to Israel. Now here in the United States, very few people know about Jonathan Pollard because it is a case of Israeli spying and not Soviet spying or Libyan spy or something like that. Most people don't know about that, but it was a very big deal. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, I got out some books here. I have a stack of 5 books relative to Israeli intrigue and influence. And I think this is a very important topic, a very timely topic right now with all the things happening in the world. And most of these books are going to be fairly easy to run down. The last one is not. The last one, and I'll get into that more here in a minute. But I was kind of torn because I wanted to, I also want to make a video just about books about the war in Iraq. So I'm going to come back to that soon because there's a few. I'm still trying to find my Smedley Butler War as a Racket book, and you got to have that if you're going to discuss war. But first off, we have By Way of Deception, and this is one I have reviewed elsewhere on the channel. By Way of Deception, this has actually come up a lot lately, by Victor Ostrovsky and co-written with Claire Hoy. And this was, I think, originally from 1991. Let me see. And there's a follow-up to this, 1990. And there's a follow-up called The Other Side of Deception. And I've reviewed both of these on the channel. So I'll link to this one at the end. And I think you can follow that link over to Other Side of Deception. Both are excellent books. All about the way the Israeli Mossad, the Israeli spy apparatus, works and how they spy on the United States. And this is another one of those things, if you're watching this channel, this is probably doesn't come as a shock at all, but there are a lot of people who do not realize that Israel runs one of the most aggressive espionage operations against the United States. And funny thing, after I read this originally in 2009, and I think it was around December 2009, one of my customers was actually an OSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations guy, and we spent the better part of the weekend together talking business, but also, as much as I could pry out of him, some of the spy stuff that they were involved in. And I asked him, I was trying to kind of ease into some of the Israel stuff because that is such a loaded thing, especially back in 2009. There weren't many people talking about this stuff openly. And I brought that up about, spying, who all spies in the United States and all. And without hesitation, he said the top contenders were, first was Israel, and the second was France. And I thought that was kind of funny. That came up, that's ahead of the Chinese, the Russians, anybody else. The top was Israel and France. And France kind of surprised me, but he said, yeah, France engages in a lot of major industrial espionage. So, but this is an excellent book about the way the Mossad works. And probably one of the most troubling things about this is where he discusses the use of what's called psionim. And psionim are local operatives that are recruited because they are Jewish. So for instance, let's say you're a Jewish doctor. So your allegiance to the nation state of Israel is then co-opted to provide, say, medical care for if some spy is in country and gets shot and he's in your area, you as a good Jew and supporter of the Jewish state, you would be expected to provide medical care without filing any kind of reports on this guy, patch up his gunshot wounds, give him whatever meds he needs or whatever, and send him on his way without, again, some of that pesky paperwork. Or say, and I think one of the examples he gives in here is, say you are a Jewish guy operating a car dealership, and one of these operators needs a vehicle, and you pull some strings and put this guy in a vehicle without maybe going through all the usual checks and balance, or maybe even reporting it stolen. But either way, you provide cover for these guys, and usually for no pay. And the reason that becomes a big issue is obviously now that puts these people, you're exploiting their religious conviction to get them to participate in very real, covert operations and political operations that have nothing to do with their religion. So as a result, you're drawing them in and kind of using them as they kind of become cover for a lot of what you're doing too. So that use of psionim is really problematic because then it casts suspicion on any Jewish person that is in a capacity to lend a hand there. So that's a big problem. Again, a lot of people would be like, dude, what's the big deal? They're an ally. But we'll get into that more here in a minute. But the problem is, again, ally or not, that creates some big problems because now that puts everyone in suspicion that is Jewish and has strong feelings toward the nation state of political Israel. And I should mention right now, for those curious, I am of the personal belief, and I think this is an accurate belief, that modern political Israel is just that. It's a place called Israel. And I think a lot of it is analogous to the trans issue. And I know probably going to catch some flack for this, but just saying you are something does not make you that thing. Now, I'm not calling for hate or horrible things to anyone, anywhere, but just calling yourself a thing does not make you that thing. So if I establish a piece of land in the Middle East and I call it Israel, that doesn't automatically make it an extension of biblical Old Testament Israel or an extension of Mosaic law or prophecy or anything else. It just means I co-opted the name and stuck it on this thing. So I think that's real important anytime we are discussing the nation state, the political Israel, to differentiate that from Old Testament or even New Testament prophecy or anything else, that is not to be conflated at all. And there has been a lot of work done to do just that. So I think seeing it for what it is, as a secular political entity that just happens to be branded as something people think of as a spiritual entity, is what we're dealing with. So I think once you get those scales off your eyes, you're able to see the actions of the political state of Israel a lot clearer. So anyway, excellent information. But again, that whole thing about Sionim is probably I mean, there's a lot of cloak and dagger kind of stuff in this book, but that was one of the things that jumped out at me about the Sionim, because again, that casts suspicion on every Jewish person that is in any kind of capacity to do financial work or anything else, that they could also be working for the Mossad and called upon to do just that. And then you get into the whole trope or whatever they say about dual loyalty, and that's exactly what that is. So kind of hard to avoid that when the Sionim are expected to do exactly the thing you're saying is this anti-Semitic trope. Now, moving right along, we have Taking Sides by Stephen Green. Now, Taking Sides, Stephen Green was I forget his bona fides, but I want to say he worked for the State Department. Somebody can look him up now and see. Trying to remember a lot for this video, but Stephen Green wrote this book in, I believe, 1984, and I believe this one in like 86 or 87. And this is all about the founding of Israel and a lot of the cloak and dagger covert operation stuff that a lot of people at the time did not know about. Now, again, this was written in the 80s. This was written in 1984. So back when this came out, this would have been radical information. In fact, it was radical information when I got this book in 2008. It was radical information. And I had to special order both of these books. Back then, I had to special order them through Borders. I don't even think I could find them on Amazon at the time. But this talks about the USS Liberty. It talks about the theft of the Nuke fiasco, where Israel was stealing like weapons-grade uranium or plutonium or whatever from the Apollo plant in Pennsylvania. And it talks about a lot of the early terrorist activities that helped start the country of Israel. So just a lot of that hidden history that, again, if a lot of people knew about, they wouldn't be so quick to brand it as, holy religious Israel. But the part about nuclear weapons, that was what really made me think about these books, is Israel's secret nuclear program is really problematic and is a massive international issue, whether or not any of you watching this think it is, because they do not cooperate with I think it's the IAEA. They don't have inspections. They are officially non-nuclear. They officially deny that they have any nuclear weapons. But not only did they steal nuclear materials to start their nuclear program, but they built a secret nuclear facility at Dimona that they operated to create all their nuclear weapons. And Stephen Green talks about this extensively, and we'll come back to him here in just a minute. But this is an excellent book if you can find it. I don't think it's terribly expensive or hard to get, but it's probably not too cheap. Excellent book, again, about the USS Liberty, about a lot of stuff that a lot of people didn't know and still don't know about what Israel was up to. Now, the follow-up book, this one has some good follow-up information, but one particular piece of information that I wanted to talk about here that I think is really important to kind of the state of things in the world today. Jonathan Pollard made a comment in a recent interview where he alluded to threatening the United States, that Israel had threatened the United States with use of nuclear weapons, possibly against the United States. And it was worded really kind of vague and all. There was a lot of conjecture in the way he presents it. but that this fighter plane was allegedly loaded with nuclear weapons, and attention was drawn to this, according to Pollard, to the American diplomats, and basically they were not so subtly threatened that they could go nuclear against the United States if they didn't get their way, if they didn't have some of the arms restrictions lifted against them. And again, this is one of those things where if you put this shoe on any other foot, if you say, okay, Iran operated a front company to steal nuclear material, to start an illegal nuclear program, you'd be like, all right, we're going to war. But in this case, for some reason, this is all okay. And this is one of the things I've mentioned in a previous video too about a nearby nuclear facility here in West Texas that I have some friends and acquaintances who work at that plant and some who've retired from it. And I asked them if they had ever heard about the Apollo fiasco or the Nuke fiasco. And I explained it to them, and they were shocked. They had never heard about this. And they were kind of like, huh, didn't know about that. Which is insane because, to me, after you read about the case of the Nuke fiasco and the way that nuclear material was stolen, it stands to reason that if you were in security, one of the things you would make sure never happened again is making sure that no one ever exploited any of these loopholes ever again and used their cultural connections or religious connections or whatever to sneak bomb material out of your plant. That would be, to me, that would seem to be a pretty important thing. And since most of this stuff happened now, some 50 years ago, all the more reason for this to be widespread, very public knowledge, because the plant that's close to me is responsible for basically refurbishing the stockpile. So they cycled through there and they check everything, make sure it's all good, and put it back out in the field. So we're talking about, very sophisticated stuff, very advanced nuclear weaponry being assembled and disassembled, and very sensitive materials being taken to and from that site. And it's kind of one of the interesting things out here is there's two major highways that go close to the plant. There's I-40, and then there is Highway 287. And both of those highways, if you are on those highways for any length of time, I mean, like if you live out here and you travel them, you will see nuclear convoys, and they're disguised as civilian vehicles. But they are there, and they are not to be messed with. And there's all kinds of rumors about what their real capabilities are. But those convoys come up and down 287 and I-40, but not on a really regular basis. But they're ferreting nuclear materials around. So again, all the more reason to be aware of what happened with the Nuke fiasco, so you don't have something like that happen again. So. And I'm trying to think, there's an office of like secure transportation or something like that handles that. And you can watch some of their videos that are up online that explain some of their security and how local police departments are supposed to interact with them so they don't get shot if they try to pull over one of these convoys full of nuke components. So, but last thing I wanted to bring up in this book about the Israeli influence and intrigue is the author mentions that not only had Israel created an illegal nuclear program and started manufacturing nuclear weapons, but they had tested them. And the specific type of nuclear weapons, let's see if I can find the... So, and I think I've read this quote over in the member section too before, but midway through my discussion with Dr. Taylor, and this is a guy he's talking about the nuclear program with, he says, midway through my discussion with Dr. Taylor, a thought occurred to me. Was there in the Vanunu photographs and materials evidence that the Israeli weapons program had previously been tested? And what he's talking about, the Vanunu photographs, Mordecai Vanunu was the whistleblower who, and I did a book review a while back about him, but he Israeli whistleblower who fled the country with a bunch of photographs and blew the whistle on the Israeli nuclear program, and that's how it became public knowledge. But like I said, it's still not officially acknowledged. So anyway, it was there in the Vanunu photographs and materials evidence that the Israeli weapons program had previously been tested, I asked. Oh yes, unequivocally, he said. Israel was already engaging in the highly sophisticated process of boosting the yields of its weapons. More important, it was doing this on a production basis. Dr. Taylor explained the Dimona reactor core was being used to make tritium and deuterium from lithium-6, and that these two precious metals were then being infused into weapons cores in order to accelerate the fission process and thus boost the energy release, that is, the yield of the weapon. In other words, Israel was producing small but powerful thermonuclear weapons in a program at a very advanced stage. And then he goes on to say that most likely Israel had already tested one of these nuclear weapons. And as we know from later writing that came out in the early 90s, Israel tested a nuke in the South Atlantic along with South Africa. We'll get to that here in a minute. And now that's pretty much an acknowledged open secret that they actually did at least one above ground aerial test of a nuclear weapon in the South Atlantic. And I think that was in like 1979. I think it was during the Carter administration. Now, this is a fun one. This is what got me thinking about the Iraq War and all that. This is A Pretext for War by James Bamford. And I reviewed this before, and someone said that their copy of this book doesn't have the part that I'm about to go to here. But A Pretext for War, this is all about James Bamford. He wrote a lot of books he's written a lot of stuff about the NSA. And this book came out, I think, in like 2006 or so. 2004, okay. And it was all about how intelligence information had been manipulated and forged and whatnot to create the pretext for the Iraq War. And one of the guilty parties in that everybody should know about, should be a household phrase, is the Office of Special Plans. The Office of Special Plans was basically an Israeli-run intelligence outfit within the Pentagon that was feeding this bad intelligence to all the right people, shall we say, to get the war started. And he talks about that here in, let's see. He has a whole chapter on the Office of Special Plans. And says, soon after the FBI launched its secret investigation of AIPAC, and this is something that we'll probably never see again, and this is something a lot of people never knew about, probably still don't know about, is that the FBI was investigating AIPAC for its role in helping launch the war in 2002. Soon after the FBI launched its secret investigation of AIPAC in 2002, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice and her deputy, Stephen Hadley, became two of the very few Bush administration officials who were informed. Thus, at the same time, Bureau agents were aiming their long-range cameras at the lobby. Top Bush administration officials and members of Congress continued to work closely with the organization. In 2002, AIPAC's annual conference included 50 senators and 90 representatives from both parties. That same month, the FBI's espionage investigation was focusing on a number of Bush administration's most senior officials, people with a long past of close ties to Israel, who are now heavily involved with the war in Iraq. One of the people Bureau agents contacted was Stephen Green, this guy, a former United Nations worker and the author of 2 books on U.S.-Israeli relations. And that, dear viewers, is how I found these books, is from this reference. They asked him to come to Washington for a meeting with the agents, a meeting that took place on June 22nd in an office in Northern Virginia. And he's quoting Stephen Green. He said, "They were extraordinarily well informed," said Green. "It was apparent they've been at this for a while. According to Green, the questions went back decades. Seated across an oval table, the agents focused on a small group of neoconservatives. The name that came up included those of Feith, Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, Feith consultant Michael Ledeen, Feith employee Harold Rode, and Stephen Bryan, the Reagan Pentagon official who was at the subject of an earlier Israeli espionage investigation. Green asked why the agents were looking into past links between the Bush officials and Israel, and they said it's a present issue. So anyway, the Office of Special Plans was really the mechanism that gave the fake intelligence, I say fake intelligence, it was fake intelligence, but the fake intelligence to the Pentagon, that the Pentagon, and a lot of people at the Pentagon knew good and well this was all bogus information, but went along with it anyway. And that was what became ultimately the pretext for war, hence the book. But that chapter alone about the Office of Special Plans, and let me see what the chapter is actually called here. I can try not to spend too much time on this, but this is definitely a good one to get just for the part 3, deception, and that's several different chapters: Situation Room, Capitol Hill, War Room, Langley, but it's all about the way the intelligence got manipulated. And I think James Bamford definitely plays very nice with them, even though he does call Israel on the carpet about AIPAC's role and the Office of Special Plans. He still is very hesitant to really call them out like he probably should have. But excellent book on that. And I think a lot of people still are wary of discussing or really looking into just how much Israeli influence played a part in starting the Gulf War. It's a lot of dead people because of that war. A lot of dead U.S. soldiers, a lot of dead Iraqis. There's a lot of bloodshed that did not need to happen. And it happened because people got tricked. Now, the last book, this is where things are going to get a little spicy. So hopefully everybody else has left now, and we've gotten down to where if you made it this far in the video, you're one of the hardcore viewers, and you might appreciate this or be horrified by this information. This is the Mini-Nuke Conspiracy by Peter Hunam and Steve McQuillan. And this is from 1994, I believe, either 94 or 95. 1995. And this is all about the secret South African nuclear program. And very well documented stuff, very fascinating case. Lots of just crazy stuff was going on in the late 80s, early 90s with South Africa and nuclear weapons research. Now, how does all this fit into it? Well, South Africa and Israel were doing a lot of cooperative research on nuclear weapons and very advanced nuclear weapons. This book gets into that, what Stephen Green was talking about, the miniaturized, boosted yield nuclear weapons, a lot of incredibly advanced weapons. And this is where things get, again, spicy, as the kids say. He quotes several different South African authorities on this that said that not only was South Africa developing these very advanced nuclear weapons, but that they had actually been deployed in combat in Angola and some of those other areas that South Africa was fighting in back in the 80s. Now, these were very small nuclear weapons, and this project was called Shampoo, for meaning clean. They were basically clean nukes that left little to no radioactivity once they had gone off. And he gets into a lot of stuff in this about red mercury, and I'm sure I probably just put myself on yet another list by saying that on a video, but Lots of fascinating stuff about the nuclear program. And this nuclear program was being run hand in hand with the Israelis, who were in the thick of it throughout that. There's a lot of good information. If you can find this book, definitely get it, because what I'm going to say now, this is, I have a lot of people following on this channel that say they don't believe nuclear weapons exist. And while no, I have not witnessed a detonation of a nuclear device. My father flew in a patrol plane that carried I think it was a Mark 12 or something kind of, I forget what exactly the nuclear depth charge. I've met a guy who was at a major detonation out in the Nevada test site and told me some of the details about that. I have a friend whose father was at the gas buggy test site in New Mexico and gave me some information about that. And there's a lot of people that I know and I know well enough to trust that have been around nuclear weapons and seen them detonated, that I find that kind of difficult to believe that they just don't exist. Now, is that possible? Who knows? Yeah, could these people have seen holograms or whatever? Who knows? Maybe so. But I'm inclined to believe that the opposite thing might actually be true, which is not only do nuclear weapons exist, but they may have actually been deployed in tactical situations that we are unaware of. And there were reports of use of nuclear weapons like that back in the Second Gulf War and the Gulf War recently. And there have also been reports of some of these clean nuclear weapons being used against Syria and Yemen. And if you look up some of these insanely large blasts that have happened and some of the bunker buster munitions that people have filmed being used there, those look very much like they could possibly be these next generation nuclear weapons. And what this guy is saying, and what this author is saying, and again, this is now 30-year-old information, is that when South Africa, when Mandela took over and the white minority had to, go into hiding, basically a lot of them fled the country or whatever, but when the white minority government finally yielded authority to Mandela, they said officially the stance was that they had dismantled their nuclear program. They had only made like 6 or 7 nukes. They dismantled them and they were all gone. And they were this magical success story of nuclear disarmament in the modern era, that they had built up these nuclear weapons in the secret program, but by golly, they disassembled them all and everything could be inspected and they were all cool. And no funny business. And here you go, Mandela. Here's South Africa. Run it like you own it. But this author is saying that not only did they have a much more extensive program than just the 6 or 7 declared nuclear weapons, but that when they shut down, that most of these nukes went to most likely Israel and possibly other rogue states, but mainly Israel is probably the one that wound up with those very advanced nuclear weapons. And this is, again, where we get into the spicy territory. There has been a theory, and I'm throwing this out there mainly to see if anyone else has heard this. I have heard this tossed around now for, goodness, over 20 years. And this theory is one of the mini-nuke variety, that this nation state, the nation state of which we speak here, has placed these advanced weapons in key places around the United States and has alerted certain politicians to this ability, and is using these, have alerted politicians of this capability, and have basically said, you don't do what we say, you lose Boston or whatever, and you don't want to do that, so do what we say. And that's one of those theories that, again, I've heard thrown around a lot. It's called like the nuclear blackmail theory, that is why at the heart of, I mean, in addition to all the Epstein kind of blackmail and all that having nuclear weapons staged in key areas, that way they don't have to be launched, they can't be detected, and then if they go off, they can always be blamed on another rogue nation, and then you get your way. And this author alludes to, these authors, plural, allude to this as well. And it's one of the few mentions of this, but they're very cagey in how they describe it. But they talk about this, that even South Africa had considered this kind of approach of threatening this kind of nuclear blackmail. But they're very ambiguous about exactly how that would work. Because again, I think the implications of this are incredible. And given that we recently had Jonathan Pollard come out and make this kind of thinly veiled threat about that Israel should be able to do what it wants, and if it doesn't, that it should be prepared to use whatever means it has at its disposal to get its way. I think that's worth knowing. And I think this is also an important thing to consider when, and I have no proof of this one way or the other, but just something to consider when we see politicians that once they take office suddenly do an about face on major positions they had held. So anyway, excellent book if you can find it. This one is very difficult to get. I actually saw this one referenced in another book I had about Israel and South Africa, and had to order this. The only place I could find it for in stock was on eBay, and I had to have it internationally shipped from like Norway or someplace. But I think it ran about $40-50, but it was well worth it. So anyway, so there you go. There are some books about Israeli intrigue and influence. And I think that is really important. And the biggest part of this too, that I think is so important for to have a rational discussion about the nation state of Israel, is you have to first strip off the baggage that comes with the name Israel. Because if it was called, Middle Easternistan or something, nobody would care. All these other things wouldn't matter. But when you dress it up with the religious trappings and you purport to be, this extension of something that people revere as a spiritual entity, then now you're running a con. And I think a good analogy for the current state of things, especially when I discuss this with friends and family that are supporters of the modern state of Israel, is it's kind of like somebody that that their relative has come into town or claims to be a relative. Somebody comes into town and says, "Hey, I'm your Aunt Grace from many years ago. You don't remember me. Last time I saw you were like 6 months old, but I'm your Aunt Grace, and I'm here in town, and I just need some help." And they know all the right stuff about your family, and so you put them up and you let them stay in your house, and they start using your credit cards and driving your car and all kinds of stuff. And your friends start looking into it, and they're like, dude, this isn't your Aunt Grace. We tracked this lady down to, she's a convicted felon for fraud, like repeated fraud. Like, she is not your Aunt Grace. And right about that time, the woman purporting to be Aunt Grace comes in and she says, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I have cancer, and I'm dying of cancer. So I really, I need your help to get over my cancer." And so you tell your friends like, "Okay, even if this really isn't my aunt, she's got terminal cancer, like leave her alone. Like, maybe she is making up the part about being my Aunt Grace, but, she's dying of cancer, like cut her some slack, okay?" And then your friends go away, they do some more work, and they're like, "Dude, we followed her. She goes to the Indian casino. She doesn't go to the oncology center. She's actually going to an Indian casino and blowing your money. She doesn't have cancer." Like, that's complete fiction. And then saying, "How dare you talk like that about my Aunt Grace?" and then you start the whole cycle over. That's not your Aunt Grace. We proved that already. We showed you she's not your aunt. And then you say, well, how could you say that about somebody with cancer? And that's how I feel whenever I try to engage in a discussion with someone about modern day Israel is, again, it's like an imposter relative and as soon as you point out one thing, it becomes the other thing. And it's just back and forth between those two things instead of, dude, you're getting conned, and you're getting conned majorly, but it's never fun to admit you're being conned. That is my clock that many of you new subscribers have expressed massive displeasure with my clock, and it's chiming and it's ticking. And before I close the video down, let me just say there is no hypnosis, no covert hypnosis going on. This is just a really cool antique clock that I'll post a picture in the post section sometime of it. But I was at a thrift store a couple of towns over from me, and I was looking around. I heard it chime, and I was like, I got to have that clock. And so I bought it, and it was relatively cheap. And I grew up with a clock like that. It was kind of like the heartbeat of our house growing up. So I really like having it around. So if there's a massive outcry against the clock, I suppose I could stop that pendulum for long enough to record a video or two. But again, for me, it's just part of the house. It's like the heartbeat, the soul of my house. So anyway, thanks for watching. And again, big thanks to the members. Big thanks to all of you that support the channel. That makes all this possible because, again, I do have a regular day job, but if there's enough of you all interested in this stuff, I'm going to keep on trucking. So again, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving.